Hi there, I'm Lillian. Welcome to my channel. Here I talk about what it's like to wake up and find out that you're married to a covert narcissist. How I was baited through love bombing, trapped by a trauma bond, and stuck, blind, in a kind of Stockholm syndrome for 34 years. Here I share my journey of healing that released me from captivity, in hopes that God will use me as an example to any sister in Christ that might be stuck like I was, unable to tell the difference between love and abuse. That you will allow our God to heal and restore your feminine heart so that you'll be able to see the difference between a difficult husband and a dangerous man. This is the third video of a series on submission. I want to talk about how when we don't understand our own femininity, we get captured and stuck in unhealthy submission. In order for covert domestic violence to exist in marriage, there's the abuser. They live through verses 2 through 5. And the wife, the victim, upon which all those traits converge. In verse 5, Paul gives us a tidy little wrap-up when he says that they have the appearance or the semblance of godliness. They look like what they're not. These traits listed in 2 Timothy 3 are hidden behind the mask of godliness. They describe what the actions are, what a wolf is like. And when you get married to a dangerous man, you oscillate between those two realities. The mask of godliness that you hear and see, and the reality of evil that you experience in your heart. As long as you only focus on verses 2 through 5, you won't be able to see the whole truth. We miss the idea of deception because we can't accept the fact that it's us who's being deceived. Even though Paul says it straight out in the next verse, he says, those who have crept into homes of unsuspecting women. We shut that down because that verse leads to the truth that no one wants to accept. Why and how, as a wife, you got duped. Who wants to step into and to own that? I sure didn't for years. I ignored the connection to my own situation. Part of it was because there's no behaviors listed that describe the experience of how it feels to be the receiver of the abuse. Was God remiss in his word? No. It's the responsibility of the shepherds, leaders, and teachers. They're the ones responsible for the incomplete teaching. When you become a shepherd, that responsibility even comes with a warning as a reminder. Don't be in any rush to become a teacher, my friends. Teaching is highly responsible work. Teachers will receive a stricter judgment. I wasn't taught, and I'm guessing you weren't either, if you're trying to tell the difference between a difficult husband and a dangerous man. We weren't taught how to tell the difference between the real godliness of a sheep and the wolves who live in the form of it. This made it impossible for me to grow into a femininely garnered, godly woman. Instead, I remained untrained, unskilled, untaught, and blind to the truth. That's how the gullible, naive woman from verse 6 gets caught in the trap of embracing submission in an unhealthy way. I was always learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth about submission. Just like with Eve from my last video, you believe the lies you're being fed. Every single bomb of love from the wolf in sheep's clothing lands in all the empty, unguarded, untrained spots inside of you, and it feels so right and good. And submission is telling you that all this wrong that you're experiencing is actually right. It's you that needs to do better, and then you'll feel it's right. Remember, that's the way masculinity thinks. Men do good, then feel good. That's also part of the incomplete teaching that blinds a wife to her own feminine nature. Her femininity has been disregarded and ignored. She's got no protection or measure of comparison. My internal compass was always in turmoil, so I accepted the lies and swallowed all of them. Hook, line, and sinker. I was caught. It wasn't my fault, and it's not yours either, but it's our problem to fix. For me, it began with accepting the responsibility of healing, and that first step was the acknowledgement of being that naive and gullible woman. You can't fix or heal or restore if you won't look at where God is showing you that you're broken. The words aren't in the text that describe the experience of that naive woman, the emotions associated with being the receiver of all those behaviors, how it feels as you experience the victimization, what it's like to be a wife, not safe in the privacy of her own home. The one who constantly finds herself on the receiving end of her husband's emotional brutality and lack of self-control. To never be able to experience healthy, loving reconciliation in her marriage. To have her feminine heart and soul continually demeaned and treated with reckless contempt as the man she's married to tears through it time and again. God doesn't list the experiences of why it's happening or how you feel. But you know what he does? He gives you the solution to stop being devoured. From such, step back. God doesn't tell us how or why to do it, because he wants to be the source of our healing. He wants us to lean on him as he takes us through the journey of healing those broken hearts that keep us blind. But I wasn't trusting God by stepping back. Instead, I was pushing into the behavior that I wanted Dean to change. But that wasn't what God wanted me to focus on. I was focusing on the why. Why was he treating me so badly? You know, all those behaviors listed in 2 Timothy 3. I had been asking the wrong question because I was focusing wrong. I had been judging his behavior, those character traits. Why is he doing this to me? I learned this is what it means to have a log in my eye, and it was making me blind. The freeing question, the more empowering question, the question that reveals the truth that I needed was, why am I allowing it? You don't have control over what other people do. It's not your right or your responsibility, but you do have the choice to not be around it and absorb it. Marriage doesn't change that responsibility that God created you with, to steward your own mind, heart, soul, and body. God showed me the reality of the wolf I was married to by allowing me to experience it to the degree that I was ignoring it and not taking responsibility for my own healing. You can't heal if you don't look in the right places that are broken inside of you. Shrewdness is your ability to see the difference between a difficult husband and a dangerous man. Shrewdness is a natural outcome that begins to happen as soon as you accept the gullibility within your heart. Shrewdness is the wisdom that grows as God begins the recovery and restoration of your feminine heart. And it starts with obeying his word. Step back. But most Christian teaching about marriage advises wives the opposite of that. God used his word to show me that I lacked knowledge. That's why I suffered in my gullibility when it came to whiffery. And he showed me the hard truth so that I could wake up from my own naivety. The counsel from churches intends for a wife to move closer to an angry man. More love, more submission, more respect, to stay married to this man that's so conceited and full of himself, and then they wrap up that counsel in twisted theology that neutralizes the gender differences between a man and a woman, effectively turning a feminine creature into a masculine one. Husbands are told to love their wives as they love themselves. And we hear a lot of teaching about this, don't we? Every Christian marriage book ever written addresses what a husband should be doing. But the teaching was never taught about how I would feel when I experienced the opposite of being loved, what it looks like in a relationship, or how to appropriately handle it. God goes into a lot of detail in Ephesians 5. That tells me there's a lot of gravity here. He adds a lot of clarity to how serious he is about this relationship between a man and a woman, and how serious he is about the responsibility that goes with the headship that belongs to the man. He says, live with your wives in an understanding way as the weaker partner. Show them honor as co-heirs of the grace of life. And then, just to be even more clear, he threatens them. If you don't, I will not listen to you. The word understanding is the Greek word gnosis. It means the act of knowing the knowledge or science of. It comes from the root word that means to be aware of, to perceive and understand and feel. Gnosis isn't just, oh yes, my wife's favorite color is purple, and she takes one cream in her coffee, and I do all the heavy lifting for her. This isn't what the Lord is talking about. He's talking about getting the knowledge about females, studying and researching and learning about them. Not just all women, sisters, nieces, aunts, mums, and grandmothers, like the noun, but specifically your own wife, the proper noun. The specific woman, not Lillian filling the role of a wife, but Lillian the woman and sister in Christ. God is telling a man, if you want a wife, you must be responsible for that relationship. Not just the start of it, but until it ends in death. And if you can't handle the whole teaching, then don't get married. Sisters, you know what that is? When God says to husbands in 1 Peter 3, if you don't live with your wife in the way I'm telling you to, I will not listen to you. That's a consequence for them not doing their part in the relationship. The part they chose to take responsibility for when they decided to become a husband. If the Lord is not going to stomach watching a son mistreat his daughter or a wolf abuse his daughter in marriage, but instead God is going to ignore them, why shouldn't you also? Do you really believe the Lord would command you to submit to being consumed by a predator? That the Lord wants you to lay yourself down through respect, love, obedience, and submission, so that a wolf pretending to be a sheep can easily extract your personhood and autonomy as he ingests all your feminine feelings and emotions and leaving a void where your heart once was, even though the Lord himself says he will block relationship with a husband who does such things. I did. I believed that God really did love my husband more than me, and my purpose was to be that sacrificial lamb and endure it, all the abuse, from ever how badly he treated me, intentionally or out of ignorance, that if I would just let my husband consume me enough, he would figure out how to love me. That was the unspoken yet very clear message from any of the shepherds that I spoke to when I was looking for help. And almost every Christian marriage book I read, with enough forgiveness, grace, and love and respect, I would be able to turn this wolf into a sheep. Submission from the female is the game changer. No, it's not. That's a lie from Satan. Submission to a wolf in sheep's clothing is people-pleasing that enables sin to grow. I want to tear down those strongholds with some truth. God is not going to tell you to do something he himself did not do. He's not going to ask a wife to nullify a consequence that he has set in place for her own protection. You can be assured that you're free to handle it just like God says he does. Turn away from it. The Hina principle in Ephesians 5:33 is that freedom. It's the female human version of God's consequence from 1 Peter 3:7, when a husband doesn't live with his wife in the understanding way and in love. Instead of pretending you're being loved and cherished in that relationship, create the distance, step back, turn away, and show him the truth. Part of the reason I drill down on this concept of Hina in Ephesians 5 is because you get in the way when you assume responsibility for that relationship. God didn't give you that burden. And if you find yourself repeatedly trying to fix it, that means you're living out of your masculinity instead of femininity. It's proof to you that your femininity needs healing. You can't experience God's provision and protection and purpose if you don't do what he says in his word. And to further complicate it for femininity, what the shepherds have done is to shift that burden from masculinity onto femininity by laying the weight of the responsibility on the wife. They've made her life harder, just like the shepherds did in Ezekiel 34. They didn't guide in the truth of God's way. They didn't strengthen the weak in the case of marriage, the weaker vessel. They didn't heal the sick and bandage the injured. Instead, they've been ruling Christian wives with violence and cruelty. Teaching wives to be accountable for all of the husband's responsibility of headship and his failures to do so, when God didn't give women the authority or the strength for that, is an abuse of their power. They make the lambs die a slow, painful, lonely death. It's wrong, incomplete, twisted, backwards, and dangerous to femininity. The Hina principle in Ephesians 5 is the freedom to reject these wrong thoughts and cast down the lies. My heart had been so scrambled by wrong teaching that said it's a command to respect and adore and admire your husband, regardless of his headship. And then the confusion in my heart was compounded and driven into more darkness with the expectation embedded in the teaching of submitting to all things, meaning continue in friendship with him even when you experience abhorrent treatment. The intent is absorb abuse into your feminine heart and hide it. That's a complete contradiction to what God says in 1 Peter 3:1. There's a tension between Ephesians 5:33 and 1 Peter 3:1. But if you'll push into that tension, you'll be able to deconstruct the wrong teaching. Only God could reach into that mess of lies, passive aggression, baiting, manipulation, gaslighting, isolation, and helplessness, and separate lie from truth, fact from fiction that had enmeshed my heart and mind. Abuse doesn't happen in healthy marriages because the man in the position of headship isn't motivated by evil. He doesn't try to make his wife live the relationship through her role as a wife, nor does he expect her to assume responsibility for every problem in the marriage. Sin and dysfunction happen, but there's reconciliation, not the demand to sacrifice every single feminine trait on the altar of marriage. Learning the distinction between being in a relationship with a man and how submission functions in the role of a wife is the key to, well, I think it's the key to everything in marriage, but primarily the key to zealously guarding one of your most prized possessions as a woman, your feminine heart. Closing thoughts. First, shh. Don't say a word about this to him. Discovering that your husband's dangerous is a scary place to end up. It's never where you thought you'd be, and it feels like an unreality. But your silence about your awareness of what he really is, that's your safety zone. And always remember, A clueless guy that causes dysfunction and seems difficult, he's not dangerous. But the malignant man is not clueless. He just pretends to be difficult and dysfunctional so that he can hide how dangerous he is.